attention to the food manufacturers. They were required to list information about calories, fat, cholesterol, and sodium. And since then, due to some of the changes in public health concerns, some of the changes in our research, and quite honestly, some of the changes that have gone on with food manufacturing, different nutrients have been added to the list of required content on food labels. Probably one of the biggest and one where a lot of us are familiar with actually started back in 2005 when trans fats really became more popular in the market. Remember, if you can remember back in the 90s, we kind of started moving away from butter and lard, and margarine showed up everywhere, and margarine was predominantly a trans fat. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of time is, for lack of a better word, we are kind of guinea pigs. They threw the trans fats out there, we kind of watched what happened with them, and then we saw that trans fats weren't necessarily that great. They were causing some disruption with our cholesterol levels. So the science behind that required the manufacturers to list how much trans fat was actually in the foods. So back in 2005 it started, but it took 3 years for everyone to agree how we were going to label trans fat, and that became mandatory in 2008. 8 years later, the group got together again, and again, based on some of the current research, some of the current health concerns, they came up with a new food label. And what I'm going to show you today, I hope I don't confuse you because it's going to kind of jump back and forth. And when I said this could have been a very timely talk, these new food labels were supposed to come out next month. But given kind of the chaos that's going on in Washington, it's not a huge surprise that that has been pushed back. And they're now scheduled to come out in January of 2020. So again, I don't want to cause confusion. There's going to be 2 different formats, but I really want to highlight what's changing and what you want to pay attention to. And just a little background, we're going to talk about the nutrition facts. So it's kind of blurry, it looks like up here. We're going to talk about this, and hopefully you guys are all familiar with the nutrition facts label. Hopefully some of us are reading it. But in addition, I frequently get the question, what's more important, the nutrition facts or the ingredient list? They're both required, they're both on every food package, and they both provide a lot of important information. I would argue they're equally important. And in case you're not aware, the ingredient list is listed in order of quantity, so highest to least. And this package on your right, you can't really see it right now, but it's a Nutella package, you know, the spreadable hazel butter sort of thing. So one would think that hazelnuts might be the first ingredient in that, but if you look at it, that's not the case, right? First ingredient is sugar, the second ingredient is fat, and then those hazelnuts show up. Okay, so they're both important. We're going to go back and forth between the 2 of them. Initially, this first nutrition facts that came out, the yellow nutrients, the fat, the cholesterol, and sodium, were highlighted in terms of nutrients that most Americans get too much of. And then the blue, you can't really see it, but it's dietary fiber and the vitamins and minerals. We really needed to focus on getting more of those. And that's how that package was initially designed. So why? Why are we changing the food label? It's been 20 years. So again, a lot has happened. We're really addressing serving sizes, and I think we're all aware in the last not only 20 years, but easily 10 to 5 years, serving sizes have exploded, right? Kind of what Jackie alluded to. What we think is 1 serving is sometimes 3 or 4. When we go out to eat, fast food, convenience foods, we think it's 1 package, but it's actually, again, 2 or 3 servings. The new food label that you have a handout in front of you, you'll see it really draws out calories. It draws out serving sizes, so those are easier to read. And then I'll go through some of the information about the changes specifically related to new research addressing chronic disease and public health.
As good as it can get.
So let's talk about those serving sizes. I think, can we change that? I think one of the biggest or the easiest serving size dilemma to kind of think about are the individual bottles. So especially like sweetened beverages, if they're teas, if they're sodas, they used to be 8 ounces, then they were 12-ounce cans, then they were 20 ounces, and then they're 24 ounces. So what they're addressing with the new kind of changing in serving sizes is they are going to require a manufacturer to label according to what is, unfortunately, typically consumed at one seating. Most people, if you look at a 12-ounce can, there's usually 1.2 or 2 servings. Most people drink that whole bottle, right? Or unfortunately, even with a 20-ounce can, they're going to drink the whole bottle. So now that's going to be labeled as such. Got it?
No, I'm trying. I can give you one or the other. I'm trying to squeeze them both back
Can we
in.
make it smaller?
Yeah.
Then it's just harder to see.
Yeah. We'll try to squeeze it in this way.
I think most of the other ones
Are okay?
I think so.
I think it's just that slide.
Yeah.
Your other slides were okay.
They were okay.
So I can move it to what side you want. Is it yellow or blue?
All right. Well, the graphic also shows common things, and that's related to, specifically this is ice cream, but it also holds true for yogurt. A pint used to be 4 servings, and now it's going to be 3 servings, because that's, again, a little bit more typical. In my house, that would probably be 2 servings. But, but again, you're going to need to pay attention to serving sizes and calories. On the yellow side, sorry, cookies or multiple package items are going to be different. They're going to require 1 cookie or 1 cracker to be like the nutrition information provided, and then they're also going to give, again, what a more typical serving size is. So it may be 5 or 6 crackers instead of what the whole bag continues. So again, the goal is to make it easier and to make it a little bit more clear. One of the serving sizes that's notable that's decreasing, that has already decreased, and you'll see this in stores, is yogurt. Yogurt used to come in 8-ounce containers, and now it's more commonly found in 6 ounces, and in some cases you'll even see 4. Okay. So let's take a look. Does that fit? Okay. So this is a busy slide, and it really is very reflective of this handout that you had. So the original label is on the left, the new label is on the right. What I like about this slide is it easily identifies or easily shows you where the changes are happening. So again, this is the format we're familiar with, and this is what we're moving towards. One of the questions when I sit down and talk to our patients is they always skip this part, the serving size. Okay? Now it's going to be easily identified, it's nice and big and bold, as are how many calories are in that serving. One of the notable changes is the calories from fat is going to go away. And for some people that's a little bit surprising, but the feedback that was received was individuals are more concerned with the type of fat versus the total calories from fat. Okay? Other notable changes that I personally am really excited about are down in the total carbohydrates category, and we're going to talk about those. The new food label is giving a % daily value for added sugars, and actually a whole line for added sugars. Right now, added sugars are kind of grouped together in total sugars, which really causes quite a bit of confusion. And again, I'm going to detail that in a little bit. So when I talk through food labels with patients, I usually I want them to think about what they're looking at. If you look at every label and try to check it off for fat and sodium and cholesterol, you're going to go crazy. You really need to think about the item and what you're looking for in that item. So for example, when I pick up a box of cereal, in my mind, cereal is an opportunity to start the day with a lot of dietary fiber. So I don't necessarily start at the top. I look for fiber. I want that cereal to have a lot of fiber and a little bit of sugar, right? If I'm looking for maybe canned beans or canned stewed tomatoes, I'm going to focus on sodium. Okay, so focusing on different nutrients for different food categories. Yes?
You said you focus on the sugar in the cereal. How many grams of sugar do you think is a reasonable amount of, I know no sugar is best, but Don't ruin my life, please.
I won't. If you,
What is
hopefully I won't. But if you want to sit
a
tight,
reasonable amount of sugar in the cereal that's not over the top, like, you know, Cocoa
Right.
Puffs?
Okay, we're going to talk about sugar in about 5 slides,
Okay.
and I will answer your question.
Okay.
So sit tight. I also get a question a lot, like what's most important? And again, my background is typically with our cardiac patients, so they're talking about fats and cholesterol and sodium. And I would argue it's listed in order. Okay, so we have fats at the top. The first fat listed is saturated fat, then trans fats, then dietary cholesterol, and then sodium. Okay? Under total fats, saturated fat and trans fats are the only 2 fats that are required by law to be listed on the food label. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, there's different types of fats. There's omega-3 fats, there's monounsaturated fats, there's polyunsaturated fats. But these are the only 2 that are required to be listed because of their adverse effect on our cardiovascular health. Let's take a look, just because it's going to be a little bit easier. Let's take a look at the handout, this blue handout that you have. And I just want to clarify, or just make sure everybody understands, when you're looking at the label, and it really doesn't matter in this case if you want to look at the original one or the new label, it says total fat 8 grams. And then it says saturated fat 1, trans fats 0. So 1 of those 8 grams of fat is from saturated fat. So where are the other 7? Okay? They're going to fall under, and again, it's not required by law for them to list this, but it's going to be either a polyunsaturated or a monounsaturated fat. Why they don't require them all to be listed, I don't know. It would make it a lot easier, but I just want you to understand that. This label does a nice job of pulling all of them out, and you can see when you look at all 4 saturated, trans, poly, and monounsaturated fat, that does add up to those total of 14 grams. Does everybody follow me? Okay. Back in 2008, when trans fats were required to be listed on a food label, you would actually see numbers here for trans fats. Because of the detrimental effect we have now kind of come to understand with trans fats, you're hard-pressed to find trans fats in many foods, or at least trans fats listed on the food label here. What I want you to pay attention to, there's 2 big categories, specifically margarines and peanut butter, that really require you to look at that ingredient list. And the white handout that I provided, on the back side, this is for your reference, these are terms that you'll see sometimes on the front of a food label. But if you look at fat-free, and it can be saturated fat-free or trans fat-free, an item can list legally as having 0 grams of trans fat if it has less than 0.5 grams per serving. Okay? So let's take a look, but again, I want to draw your attention to this. Let's take a look at this label. This is a peanut butter label, and if you look, it says saturated fat 3.5, trans fat 0. And I understand it's hard to see up here, but the first ingredient in this peanut butter is sugar. The second, or rather peanuts, the second ingredient is sugar. The third ingredient is partially hydrogenated oil. When you see the words partially hydrogenated, that should send the alarm in your head that that's a trans fat. Okay? So people will pick this up and be like, oh, great, 0 trans fats. When in reality, trans fats are the third ingredient in that item. Same thing here. This is a margarine product. And quite honestly, when you look at the ingredient list for margarine, you do want the first ingredient to be liquid, ideally water. This one is liquid oil, then water, and then there's 3 different types of partially hydrogenated oil in that product. And it is what it is, right? It's margarine. So it shouldn't be too much a surprise, but it's still really misleading when the package says 0 grams of trans fats. Okay? So same thing here. This is peanut butter. It says the same thing in terms of peanuts, sugar. This one actually not only has sugar, but has molasses in it. And then it has hydrogenated vegetable oil. 0 grams of trans fats. If you like peanut butter like I like peanut butter, you want peanuts and salt. That's it. Okay? And I understand the confusion, and that's why, again, I really encourage you to look at both the numbers and the ingredient list. So the next item is cholesterol. Cholesterol is not really changing between the new and the old. One thing you can think of if you, again, are trying to make decisions, cholesterol in the foods that we eat is only found in animal products. Okay? So if it says 0 grams of cholesterol, there's no animal product in there. But again, the claims on the front of packages can be misleading. Peanut butter and potato chips used to be plastered with cholesterol-free and no cholesterol. It's true, but there was never cholesterol in those products to begin with, right? Hopefully. But again, it creates confusion because I still think a lot of people get cholesterol and fat confused. So yeah, peanut butter is cholesterol-free. It's relatively high in fat, predominantly a healthy fat. Potato chips, cholesterol-free. Higher, maybe not so great of a fat, right? Yeah.
Cooking up potato chips used to be in fat when they first started out. Did they change the method of cooking them so there's no fat in them now anymore?
No, they're still cooked in fat. Some potato chips are baked, and that makes a difference.
Right.
The type of fat does make a difference in terms of how much saturated fat might be in that potato chip bag. All oils are a blend. Nothing is 100% saturated. Nothing has 100% monounsaturated.
And get some lard.
Right. Right? There you have some saturated fat. Typically in processed foods in the food manufacturing industry, the typical oil that's used is corn oil,
Yeah.
which is predominantly an omega-6 fatty acid, which falls under a polyunsaturated, which sounds okay, but those omega-6 fatty acids tend to be more inflammatory. So if you have a choice, there's corn oils in almost everything. So you're going to get corn oil, but if you are making, I don't know that you make potato chips, but if you're making fries at home, or I do a lot of steak fries in the oven, then you can kind of control how much fat you're getting there and choose a better fat. Okay?
What's a better fat?
More of a monounsaturated fat. So who asked the question? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So when I make fries at home, I'll bake fries and I'll put a little olive oil on it. So olive oil, avocado oil, peanut oil are more monounsaturated versus,
Do you
yeah.
know what sunflower oil is?
Sunflower and safflower oil are predominantly omega-6s.
What's that mean?
So they're more inflammatory.
Oh.
And vegetable oil, like the generic vegetable oil, is typically a blend of either corn, sunflower, or safflower oil. Okay. So if you get canola oil, is predominantly monounsaturated fat. So if you get to choose, or if you're looking, for example, on salad dressings, if you're going to buy salad dressing, ideally the salad dressing oil should be olive oil or canola oil. Again, they're still 100% fat, but it's just a better blend. Okay? Yeah.
What's with rapeseed oil?
That's another word for canola oil.
Oh.
What's that?
Okay, rapeseed and canola oil. Canola oil sounds a little bit better than rapeseed oil.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's a good question though. Any other questions about while we're on it? Okay. Let's see. Sodium is not changing. The percent daily value is changing slightly. It's changing from 2,400 milligrams to 2,300. There was a lot of pushback. Initially, they wanted to take it down to 1,500 milligrams, but you can understand a lot of the food manufacturers weren't going to be happy about that. So the biggest area, though, and the area that I think is going to have the greatest impact is in the carbohydrates. So I went ahead a little bit, but go ahead and refer to, again, the new food label. It's going to take total carbohydrates and it's breaking it out into 3 different categories. You have dietary fiber, you have total sugar, and now they're going to pull out added sugar, which I personally am thrilled about. And this is directly related to the concern regarding the obesity epidemic and the increase in diabetes. So what's the difference? Why is it important that we're pulling it out? I get the question all the time. Aren't dairy products and fruit too high in sugar to eat? And those are not the sugars. Those are naturally occurring sugars. Those are not the sugars you need to worry about. So all of our dairy products have inherent lactose in them, and that's the sugar that's in a milk product. Our fruits have fructose in them. Again, the sugar that's naturally found in fruit, why it tastes sweet and is satisfying in that regard. Same thing with vegetables. Not as much, but you know, if you cook vegetables the right way, sometimes they do taste sweet. And then this is really important in terms of juice. It needs to be 100% juice. Not a fruit drink, not a fruit beverage. Okay? So these are naturally occurring sugars that you do not need to lose sleep over. What is concerning is all the added sugars that are found in a lot of foods we don't even think about. Now listed up here are kind of the obvious ones. The desserts, the ice cream, the frozen yogurt, some of the coffee drinks that are more like milkshakes these days. And again, cookies, candies, teas, all of those things are added sugar. And here you go, here's the answer to your question. How much added sugar is okay? And the old food label didn't even address this. They didn't put a daily value on it. But because it comes up all the time, the Heart Association has come up with a recommendation of no more than 6 to 9 teaspoons of sugar, respectively, for women and men. Most Americans consume a whopping 22, okay, daily. All right? And when you, yes. And I'll show you a couple examples. It adds up real quickly. So if you look on a food label, okay, where it says added sugar, where it's going to say added sugar, every 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. Okay, so let that sink in. And the example up here shows you or explains that a 20-ounce bottle of a sweetened beverage can easily have about 60 grams of added sugar in it. So that's 60 divided by 4, you're at 15 teaspoons of sugar in that beverage alone. So with regard to your cereal question, I usually tell my patients in terms of cereal, if you're not buying adult cereal, if you're buying sweetened cereal, really try to keep it, so maybe 8 grams of sugar, that's 2 teaspoons. Okay? So just an example, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I used to teach a class for kids and their families and I knew the numbers, but I know that regular Cheerios, the yellow box, you can add a teaspoon of sugar to that cereal and you'll still have less sugar in it than Honey Nut Cheerios by itself. Okay, so Honey Nut Cheerios already has too much sugar in it.
So anything less than 8 grams.
That's what I would personally recommend because that's 2 teaspoons. You know?
That's a lot.
I mean, and ideally, what we want people to do is buy the regular Cheerios and cut up, you know, a banana or put some blueberries on there, or put any fruit on there because you're not only going to get a little bit of sweet, but you're going to get fiber. And fiber is important for pretty much everyone across the board as well. Yes?
Cane sugar, what happened to old cane sugar? Why did they get rid of that and put this other junk into it?
Because it's cheaper to manufacture. But that's a great question, because sugar is sugar, and I'm going to show you that in a second too. So what I did was I put some examples up here. God, it's really hard to see these. I'm going to sit down, I can't even see them from there. So the top label is a Snapple bottle. Uh-oh, showing my age. So the Snapple bottle up here, there's 2 columns, if you can see that. It says the serving size is 8 ounces and there's 2 servings in that container. So this label has nicely gone ahead and kind of showed you both the 8 ounce and the full container, but the 8 ounce has 18 grams of sugar, and the full container has 34 grams of sugar.
Wow.
So again, 34 divided by 8 is roughly 8.5 teaspoons of sugar. The Coke can that we're all familiar with, most sodas, and I'm not necessarily picking on Coke, but most 12-ounce sodas have 39 or 40 grams of sugar in it. So 10 teaspoons.
Wow.
So an exercise I used to do with the kids and their families is we would take, too close?
I don't know, it's, sometimes it happens.
Could
with
be
batteries.
batteries in the mic.
Can you guys hear me if I don't use it?
No.
No?
Hang on. Can you use your natural voice for 2
I will.
seconds?
2 seconds.
So one example that I used to do with the kids and their families with regard to sodas is we'd take a glass, a 12-ounce glass, and we would have a huge bag of sugar. And we would have the kids scoop teaspoons of sugar until they guessed how much sugar was in a Coke. They would always stop at 4 or 5. Never would someone go up to 8 or 10. And then you think about, essentially, that's what Coke is, right? It's all that sugar with water. Who's going to drink that? And people do it all day long, every day. And we can't get them to drink that much water.
And
So-
multiple.
Right. And so, I mean, this alone, sweetened beverage, is one of the reasons I'm so excited about the added sugar thing. Yes?
Is that also true if you're drinking the diet one?
So-
Because they say if you're diabetic, drink the diet. Drink the diet. There's still,
So, the diet sodas don't have the same sugar in them, right? They have the fake sugars, which those in and of themselves, I mean, ideally, I used to say, yeah, I used to feel comfortable being like, okay, if you're in transition, Diet Coke is a nice step down. But really, research has shown for most people, the reaction that people have to the aspartame and the sweeteners that are used in diet sodas actually does not inhibit calorie intake and is actually leading to higher caloric intake and again leading to diabetes for a lot of people. So it's kind of counterintuitive. The diet soda industry sounds like it would be a good choice, but we really want people to get to water or unsweetened beverages. And this is, with all of this, I would also say, really, like, how much are you doing and how often are you doing? If you're someone who drinks, and I remember as a young dietitian, I was working in a clinic, and this woman came in and told me that she had 2 sodas a day. And I'm like, well, that's not so bad. She had 2 liters of soda. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I literally, my mouth almost dropped. And I can't fathom that, first of all. But in her respect, if you're moving from 2 liters a day to 2 regular sodas a day, that's a huge step in the right direction. But again, I just want people to think about kind of what's in those products. And your question in terms of cane sugar. So a lot of times you're looking at sugar or honey or brown sugar. These, I think, are 46 different types of sugar that you can find in foods. Typically in that ingredient list, if the word ends in OSE, so dextrose, sucrose, maltose, those are all derivatives of sugar. Some of the ones up here that you're going to recognize obviously are things like brown sugar, beet sugar, cane sugar, molasses. But similarly, this happens with sodium. There's a lot of different hidden types of sodium listed in foods, but sugar is by far the biggest. And perhaps the biggest culprit is kind of there in that second column, almost 2/3 of the way down, is high fructose corn syrup. That is in so many foods these days because it's so cheap to produce and easy for manufacturers to use. Okay. So any questions about all the sugar that's out there? Yes?
As a diabetic, you
Yes.
said that fruit is good for you, it's better than regular.
Yes.
I, for one, have no portion control. So when I sit down with a bowl of strawberries, I'm gonna eat the whole bowl, and my sugar, when I test it's gone up.
Right.
So there is, you have to portion control the fresh fruits as well.
You do, absolutely. Especially for a diabetic, you do have to pay attention to portion size. And I always tell my patients too, really the guidelines for diabetic eating are appropriate for everyone. Because it's balanced eating and it's appropriate serving sizes. So Again, when we say eat your fruit and vegetables versus drinking them, you're going to get more dietary fiber in that bowl of strawberries. And that fiber is what helps blunt your blood sugar response. Okay? And the example that I always share with my patients is think about an apple, applesauce, and apple juice. Okay, the juice has no fiber. It's gone in 2 seconds, it quenches your thirst, it has the potential to immediately elevate your blood sugar level. The applesauce, kind of in the middle. There might be 1 gram of fiber depending on the brand that you choose. But that apple, and again, an apple the size of a tennis ball, that's considered a serving size, and there's certainly bigger pieces of fruit out there. So really pick the smaller fruits. An apple has roughly 3 to 4 grams of sugar, takes longer to eat, takes longer to really affect our blood sugar. Okay. Again, that same class I used to do with kids, we would squeeze orange juice. 8 ounces of orange juice is the equivalent of 2 oranges. Most of us don't sit down and eat 2 oranges at one time, but 8 ounces of orange juice is gone like that. Okay? So again, eating your fruit is always better than drinking it. Another tip for diabetics in terms of fruit as a snack. So sometimes people are surprised that fruit is 100% carbohydrate. So for a diabetic, typically if you pair that piece of fruit with a protein or a fat, so cottage cheese or peanut butter or a piece of string cheese or a handful of nuts, any of those right off the top of my head, those fats and proteins will again help blunt that blood sugar response. Okay? So again, getting back to sizes, really the smaller fruits, bananas can be especially problematic for some diabetics. I personally always buy the smaller bananas just because I'm picky with them anyway. But the smaller ones are more appropriate serving sizes. Most bananas that count as 2 servings. Yeah.
What about dried fruit?
Great question. So dried fruit and nuts kind of go together. They can be great snacks, but because it's dehydrated, it's a more concentrated source of calories. So a serving of dried fruit is about 1/4 of a cup. It's like a serving of nuts is about 6, depending on the nut, usually 6 to 12 pieces, which is barely a handful. So I like dried fruit when I'm active, like if I'm hiking or skiing, it's easy to keep with me. But having a big bowl of nuts or a big plate of that dried fruit that comes around at Christmas time can be real tempting and challenging in terms of staying within a serving size. Any other questions? Yes.
I've been trying to find the answer to this. A while back when I was first being diabetic, they told me that say you have something that's 29 grams, you have carbs, but you also had something that below it that the fiber was 5, and you could deduct it,
Yeah.
but I can't get it.
So yeah, that was a common educational tool that we would use for diabetics, and again, it just kind of emphasizes the importance of dietary fiber. Let me see if I can find an example of a label. Let's go this way. I don't think I have a good fiber example for you, but yeah, you're absolutely right. So let's keep the math easy. So say it had 30 grams of total carbohydrates and 10 grams of fiber. Then that was going to lead, and this is exactly why they're throwing added fiber or added sugars on the label. That they would let you deduct the fiber because the fiber was not going to have a negative effect on your blood sugar, but the remaining 10 kind of ambivalent sugars that are out there could be problematic. But that's how we used to teach it. Does that make sense?
So how do you teach it now?
So now it's really paying attention to portion size, fiber, and then those added sugars.
So using this,
Yeah.
it says 37 carbs
Yes,
and 4 fiber,
right.
is that really?
So then this product would count as 33 grams of carbohydrates. So if you're a diabetic that's doing carb counting, and say you get 36 or 40 grams of carbs at every meal, then that would be 33. Okay. Yeah.
did you say that 6 to 9 teaspoons of sugar a day is okay or less?
Yes, well, that's the Heart Association.
Okay,
You
that's
certainly
our-
don't need to strive to get that.
No, but less than that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
What about the flavored waters that are out now?
Okay, so I almost put those up there. So the flavored waters can be tricky because if you look at them, some of them still have a lot of added sugar. Some of them will say natural flavoring, And I actually looked up Dasani and LaCroix because those are pretty popular. And the websites and the information are super vague about what that natural flavoring is. But they don't have supposedly any calories in them. Again, I like them. I use them because, especially in the afternoon, I like the carbonation. But a lot of times I'll just do club soda or plain seltzer water and just put lemon or lime or something like that in it.
Oh.
But you really like the vitamin waters too. I don't know if that's on here. Like some of those designer waters, there's actually a lot of sugar in those as well.
Anything negative about stevia?
Hold on. I have more confidence in that. Was it you, Ross? I have more confidence in that than some of the other artificial sweeteners that are out there. And I know that you can bake with that, and it doesn't have an adverse effect when you bake with aspartame and some of the other ones. It has more of a bitter flavor to it, and that one's easier to kind of use across the board in recipes. It's sweeter for a lot of people. They notice how sweet it is, and they tend to use less. I put this up here because this is a big kind of area of confusion for people as well. Getting back to the dairy products. Again, all dairy products have natural sugar in them, and that is okay. If you're looking at regular plain milk, kind of a rule of thumb, a cup of milk has about 12 grams of sugar, and that's normal. Okay, that's not added, that's from the lactose itself. Yogurt can change depending on the type of fat, which is interesting. So typically, and again, I'm talking about plain yogurt, none of the flavored stuff. So plain yogurt is typically, you're gonna find 12 to 16 grams of lactose in it. And it's kind of counterintuitive. The whole fat yogurt has less sugar in it, and that's due to the manufacturing process, okay? When fat's removed, there's more water in it, and the water has more of that liquid lactose in it. So the flip side of this story is Greek yogurt, the way it's processed and strained and thickened, some of that lactose is lost. So Greek yogurt, again, plain Greek yogurt, has less sugar in it, less lactose in it than regular yogurt. But that's something that's really important to look at because a lot of people, associate yogurt as being a health food. And I want you to look at these labels. So, it's so hard to see. So go to this side. Can we focus on that? A little bit more. Can you guys see that? Not really?
No.
Not so much.
Okay, not so much. So scoot to the other side because I wrote it out. So the label on the left is plain yogurt. The label on the right is fruit yogurt. It doesn't say what kind, but it's fruited yogurt. The plain yogurt has 10 grams of sugar, again from the lactose. The fruit yogurt has 44. Okay, so what you do is you take that 44, and you know that the baseline is 10, so there's 34 grams of added sugar in your yogurt. Okay? That's 8.5 teaspoons of sugar in what you're thinking is a health food. All right, so the story here is buy the plain, add your own fruit. Okay, but this drives me crazy. And Costco's Kirkland brand used to be notorious. They're fat-free yogurt. Again, fat-free, so everyone's like, oh, that's the one I'm gonna buy. Had 46 grams of sugar in it. Now, admittedly, I haven't checked that lately, but it used to people, our coworkers used to bring that in. I'm like, what are you doing? So these are things that the information is there. It's just a matter of understanding it. Yeah.
And that's in a single serving, right?
Correct.
Whole-
No, that's 8 ounces or 6 ounces now. Okay, that's a tiny amount. So ounce for ounce, that's more sugar than a Coke, right?
Wow.
Yes.
Why did they lower the ounces and not lower the price?
I am not the person to ask. So. Same thing here with obviously some of the flavored milks. So this holds true for, these are both chocolate milk examples. Organic chocolate milk has 24 grams of sugar in it, and again, typically 12 of those are natural. So again, 12 divided by 4, there's 3 teaspoons of sugar in a cup of that chocolate milk. But this holds true for flavored almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk, all the milks that are out there. If it's not plain and unsweetened, pay attention to the amount of sugar that's in there. Yes.
What do you think a typical average bowl of ice cream would have in grams? I'm asking for some of the people that have ice cream.
So you're not asking it because everyone at work knows it's my weakness.
My favorite food.
I would guess, depending on the brand, probably at least 30, maybe more. I mean, it really depends too. I mean, if I'm gonna buy ice cream, and this is, I don't think I've mentioned this yet about the ingredient list, but the fewer ingredients, the better. You know, if I'm gonna buy, I like what I consider to be the good stuff. So that just says cream, eggs, you know, it doesn't go on and on forever. So, I mean, even as a dietitian, when I'm picking up ice cream, that's a label I'm not gonna look at, because I know it is what it is, right? But that's probably why I don't know the answer to that question. But it is what it is.
So it's
a
okay to
dessert.
have, occasional.
Occasionally, absolutely. I mean, I don't pretend that I eat perfect every single time I eat.
Some of us didn't have any.
All right, so are we clear on the sugar and dairy products? All right. I think I'm getting close to the end. Let's go back so you guys can actually read it. Back to kind of the old and the new. So we've moved our way down. Protein is staying the same. There is actually, if a product is going to make a protein claim, for example, if it's going to say high in protein and give you a value, that value is going to be based off a daily value of 50 grams. Right now, there's no real requirement for protein. And then the changes at the bottom. The original label had the 4 vitamins and minerals listed, and it had what we call a footnote. So the footnote at the bottom currently gives you the daily values for, again, fats, total cholesterol, sodium, and carbohydrates and fiber based on 2 different calorie levels. So a calorie level of 2,000 calories or 2,400 calories. It kind of gives you goals down there, which is very confusing to a lot of people. And then the daily values down the side are relative to that 2,000 calorie level. So on the new label, the daily values are still there, but it's all based on 2,000 calories, and they've taken out that footnote. Okay. Some of the vitamins and minerals have changed to reflect, again, some of the current research. So the big change is that vitamin A and vitamin C are going to be gone. So they're no longer going to be listed because the consensus is that those vitamins and minerals aren't at risk in our population anymore. Vitamin D is going to be added, which I think is great. There's certainly been a lot of research lately on how pretty much most of the population is deficient in vitamin D, so they're going to add that. Potassium is a nutrient that you may see on food labels already, okay? And that's on there specifically due to its relationship with high blood pressure and the risk for strokes and cardiovascular disease. So research has shown that higher potassium intake, and I'm emphasizing potassium intake from foods, not supplements, but from foods, coupled with a lower sodium intake, can really help improve blood pressure control. And the daily value for potassium is 4,700 milligrams. Calcium is still going to be on there, and it's going to be listed as a milligram, which I think is fantastic. Right now, if you look at calcium, it's only given as a % daily value, which doesn't tell us a whole lot. And especially for really all of us, it should be a concern. Calcium's not just an osteoporosis concern for women, but men should be aware of that as well. Again, specific to this population, if people are kind of cycled on and off steroids, steroids can pull calcium from our bones, so that's important to know. Until 2020, until we actually see how much calcium is in your food, a little trick that I can share with you right now based on the current food label. This only works for calcium, but if you look at this example, it says calcium 20%. If you remove the percentage sign and add a 0, there's 200 milligrams in whatever this product is. So it only works for calcium. So you go home and look at your milk container, and it says, no added sugar, but it says calcium 30%. There's 300 milligrams of calcium in 1 cup. Does everybody follow me?
Yeah.
Okay, it only works for calcium, but again, hopefully in a year and a half you won't have to do that trick. It'll be listed here for you. And then iron is remaining because iron is part of a lot of our proteins and enzymes specific to this group. It's part of hemoglobin, so it's delivering oxygen to our muscles and our lungs. And both high and low iron intake can be a concern, and there's different stages of life that higher iron and lower iron is important, so iron is definitely staying on there as well. All right. I think that is it. This is the old and the new. Any questions that we didn't cover? Yeah. Oh, good question. I almost put those on there too. So fruit bars, cereal bars, granola bars. Again, the shorter ingredient, the better. Is anyone familiar with Lara bars? Lara. Just fruits and nuts. They're original ones. I have to say they've kind of started to expand and they're adding more ingredients. But I was a huge fan of them. Prescription bars, if you've seen those, they're out now too. I would say those are probably a good choice because, again, there's usually 5 ingredients listed, although some of them will say things like peanut butter flavoring, blueberry flavoring, and that's not super clear.
What about kind bars?
Kind bars are okay. When I look at those things, though, 2 things. Is it a snack or is it a meal replacement? Because some people will have them as meals. Some bars are 100 or 200 calories. Some bars are 500 or 600 calories. So if it's a snack, you know, you're really thinking more of that 100 to 200 calorie level. And I would say less than 3 grams of saturated fat and at least 3 grams of dietary fiber. Okay, so that's going to mean it ideally, hopefully, has either fruits or nuts in it. The ones that are covered in chocolate or caramel or yogurt, those are glorified candy bars. Okay? Personally, some of the ones that I like, the old school, I don't even know what they're called, the green package that has 2 of them in there. Thank you. Like the old school original ones that don't have a lot of stuff added to them. Nature Valley. So, but yeah, that's a huge segment of the market right now, and it's all over the board. But I always tell patients at least 3 grams of fiber and less than 3 grams of saturated fat. And if it's going to be a meal kind of replacement, you want to make sure there's some protein in there. The frozen fruit bars. Okay, so they kind of are what they are, right? It's a dessert. So you're really looking at, you know, really the calories and the calories from sugar, because it's probably going to be 100% sugar. If it's a fruit bar, if it's frozen fruit, that would be better.
So if it just says fruit?
You have to look, that's where you look at the ingredient list. Yes?
You answered the question about the artificial sweeteners. I didn't quite understand. I use a lot of artificial sweeteners. I use Splenda. Of those on the market, Which one would you recommend?
Splenda and Stevia, for sure. The Splenda and the Stevia. Yes. Stevia is the one that the other gentleman asked me about. It's just uh-huh. Yeah.
Stevia.
So Splenda is also one that, you can cook pretty readily with. It's nice. Yes.
I've tried some of that Truvia, that's another
Yeah.
one. Gives me migraine.
I have not tried that yet. I don't know, this is my thing with the sweeteners, and I don't know if I should say this. And some of my coworkers won't be surprised to hear this, but I'm not a super sweet craver or sweet person, so I don't like it. I don't like sugar in general. So if I'm going to use or want sugar, I put sugar in it. Because to me it's less processed. And I personally don't trust some of the artificial sweeteners. I'm not going to say I've never had a Diet Coke, because I certainly have. But I don't drink that stuff anymore, and if I'm going to sweeten something, I put regular sugar in it. If all of this has been too confusing, and there's too many numbers and too many percentages, I would refer you to this book. Have you guys heard of Michael Pollan? Anyone? He's written a handful of books. This one's nice and small. And in the book, he has probably 46 keys to eating food. I mean, it's very lighthearted, but he is a scientist. And these are some of my favorite ones. So his food rules are eat food. That's the first one. And it sounds easy, but there's a lot of things out there that aren't real food. So eat food. Avoid foods that contain more than 5 ingredients. Avoid foods that have some form of sugar listed in the first 3 ingredients. And if you go to a lot of lectures, especially diabetes lectures and obesity lectures, that's when you're going to hear a lot. And it sounds like that would be easy. It's real hard to do. Sugar is usually, or in some form, one of the top 3 ingredients in most packages. It may even be one of the top 3 ingredients in that ketchup bottle. This is one of my favorite. If it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. And then this one too, don't get your fuel from the same place your car does. Okay. But yeah, he's a great writer. He has a couple, like this one's out. He has In Defense of Foods. He has a book called Cooked, but really thought-provoking writing, and he kind of goes through the whole food industry. So I thought that's an easier way to read that label. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Let's thank Kristy. Bye, everybody. Drive home safely. See you either at the exercise gym, the trip to Nixon Library, happy hour, or here next month. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Next month is Dr. Cassaberry. Do not miss next month. Okay? Mandatory luncheon. Okay? Bye, everybody. Be safe.